Welcome to NTD Evening News. I'm Chris Beers. Our top stories. President Trump says Iran must stop its proxies in Lebanon from causing trouble, or the U.S. will hit Iran very hard again. Vice President Vance calling today's negotiations with Iran a historic meeting. He says the parties have made great progress and that he sees a future where everyone can work together. The ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah continuing to hold. President Trump issuing a stern warning to Iran to stop its proxies from causing trouble in Lebanon. Jason Perry has the details. Speculation that British Prime Minister Keir Starmer will resign as soon as tomorrow, reaching a tipping point. Even President Trump weighs in, posting, "I wish him well." A pivotal vote in Colombia. Two candidates, two visions for the country's future and what it could mean for U.S. relations. In the FIFA World Cup, Spain and Japan end their matches with identical outcomes, both with dominant victories against their opponents. Find out how it happened and more about a young Spanish player who could become soccer's next big star.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
U.S.-Iran peace talks are underway. They're taking place today at the Bergenstock Resort Lake Lucerne in Switzerland. Here are the details.
Vice President JD Vance and Iranian officials are having direct peace talks in Switzerland. These are among the highest-level direct U.S.-Iran contact made in years. Vice President Vance has become the administration's principal negotiator on Iran and called the meeting historic.
Never before, outside of Islamabad and here, so outside the last few months, never before has the Iranian and American leadership met at such a high level. What the president has asked us to do is turn over a new leaf, to transform our relationship with the people of Iran and to extend an outstretched hand that says to the people of Iran that if your leadership is willing to give up being a driver of regional instability, if they are willing to give up nuclear weapons ambitions for the long term, then the United States is willing to fundamentally transform our relationship with that country.
The meeting also involved Special Envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, along with officials from Pakistan and Qatar. Vance says the negotiations are covering a host of issues that are important not only to Americans, but to the world.
The opening of the Strait of Hormuz, the ending of the Iranian nuclear program, all of these things have already been accomplished. The question before us now is how much more can we accomplish together? Can we turn over a new leaf? Can we change relations in the Middle East permanently?
The vice president also made remarks on the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. Even before negotiations got underway, the Iran deal was being tested by fighting between Israel and the Iran-backed militant group in Lebanon.
We've seen great progress over the last just couple of days in ensuring that the ceasefire holds in Lebanon. These things are always a little bit messy. If you go back to how much was happening 3 months ago and compare it to 3 weeks ago, great progress has been made. I think that the President of the United States and the United States of America have done more to stop the conflict in Lebanon than any government anywhere in the world over the last few months.
Meanwhile, with negotiations underway, President Trump issued a warning to Iran that the U.S. could impose a new toll on maritime traffic in the Strait of Hormuz if a long-term peace deal isn't reached within the next 2 months. Vice President Vance said during the meeting that great progress has been made, and he expects further progress to be achieved in negotiations.
Staying with the Middle East, the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah continuing to hold. President Trump issuing a stern warning to Iran to stop its proxies in Lebanon from causing trouble. NTD's Jason Perry has the latest.
Smoke seen rising in Lebanon on Saturday, just hours after a ceasefire took effect between Israel and the Iran-backed Hezbollah terrorist group. Afterward, Israeli forces reported striking dozens of Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon, saying those strikes were in response to Hezbollah launching more than 50 projectiles toward Israeli soldiers in southern Lebanon. The leader of the Iran-backed terrorist group releasing a statement on Sunday claiming that Hezbollah Hezbollah was committed to the ceasefire, but would confront any violations of the agreement and saying, quote, Israel will not stay in Lebanon. Israeli forces recently released a map showing where troops are currently operating in southern Lebanon, approximately 6 miles inside Lebanese territory. And on the same day, President Trump on Truth Social commenting on the situation, saying Iran must immediately stop their highly paid proxies in Lebanon from causing trouble. If they don't, we'll hit Iran very hard again, just like we did last week, only harder. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying this.
We destroyed over 90% of the 150,000 rockets and missiles that Hezbollah amassed against us. We established a security zone in Gaza. We established a security zone in Syria. We established a security zone in Lebanon, and we shall keep it as long as is necessary to protect our people.
And as the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah officially continues, Israeli troops continuing to operate in southern Lebanon, releasing this footage of a Hezbollah tunnel filled with projectiles that Israel says is located directly under a residential neighborhood. At the same time, some displaced residents in Lebanon returning to their homes in the south, with one resident expressing hopes that they'll be able to return to their jobs and, quote, live a safe and stable life. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Energy Secretary Chris Wright said today that 67 ships went through the Strait of Hormuz in the last 24 hours, similar to traffic before the war began in terms of oil and oil products.
In the last 24 hours, or yesterday, 67 ships went through the Strait of Hormuz. The day before, it was 55 ships. So, and in terms of oil and oil products, about equal to where we were before the conflict. So yeah, traffic is flowing through the straits quite nicely. Now that's because of a U.S. military presence. Iranians still have not demined the central shipping channel, but the U.S. opened a separate channel down south, and we've been escorting ships through that for several weeks now, and at very high levels today.
Wright acknowledged that some commercial shippers still have safety concerns. Iran's Joint Military Command on Saturday said it had closed the strait over Israel's military campaign in Lebanon against the Iranian-backed Hezbollah terrorist group. The U.S. disputes that announcement. Russian-annexed Crimea suspends gas sales to the public after a Ukrainian drone attack overnight. The Russian-appointed governor of Crimea says 4 people were killed and 28 wounded. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said the Ukrainian military hit an oil depot in the Crimean city of Kerch. The attacks also hit deeper into Russia. Local authorities in Russia's Krasnodar region said a Ukrainian drone attack on an oil transport facility killed 1 person on a passenger ferry and set an oil terminal on fire. Ukraine's president confirmed the attacks. Ukrainian forces have repeatedly targeted fuel supplies in Crimea in recent weeks, triggering an energy crisis. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky describing the attacks as part of Ukraine's long-range sanctions against Russia's energy infrastructure. The Russian Defense Ministry says 239 Ukrainian drones were shot down. The Crimean governor writing on social media that local gas stations will halt all sales to non-state companies and individuals until further notice. At the end of May, authorities restricted the sale of gas to 5 1/3 gallons per vehicle owner per week using prepaid coupons. Those were snapped up immediately following their release on an official messaging app channel, and drivers lined up for hours. Social networks have been abuzz with requests and advice on where to find gas. Authorities launching a hotline for tourists in the area who found themselves trapped. Some drivers bringing in gas from nearby regions, but they're restricted to carrying about 26.5 gallons per vehicle. The Kremlin, recognizing the scope of the problem, says it will address the issue quickly. Joining us now to discuss Vice President JD Vance's trip to Switzerland and the talks with Iran set to unfold there is Dr. Bo Kabbalah, professor for political science at Tarleton University in Texas. Dr. Bo, welcome. Iran says the talks in Switzerland are stalled after President Trump. Great to see you. Now, Iran says the talks in Switzerland are stalled after President Trump threatened to attack Iran over its funding of Hezbollah, the terror group in Lebanon, of course. What do you make of this situation?
Sure. Well, I think there is some mutual testing right now on both, and in fact, all sides who are party to this memorandum of understanding. What exactly does it mean? What is the way forward? And so even as you've had different elements in the Iranian regime, primarily the IRGC, I think push a little harder towards closure. The overall situation, in my opinion, is very positive as moderates support opening, and as you have the Qatari prime minister meeting the vice president, joined by the Pakistani prime minister at this historic Swiss resort to move forward slowly but surely.
Yeah, expand on that. Expand the significance of this, because Vice President JD Vance is saying that this is unprecedented.
Well, it's unprecedented. Let's just emphasize it's a special location. It's the Birkenstock Resort overlooking Lake Lucerne. So that itself is positive, because if you consider what kinds of negotiations have gone on here right after the Second World War, European integration, sort of peace in the Sudan, reunification of Cyprus, this is a high-level place where serious negotiations take place. What I think is unprecedented is the fact that since 1979, the U.S. and Iran have not met at this level to undertake negotiations. They're joined in Pakistan's case, also the prime minister of Qatar, by Iran's neighbors in the Gulf. And so there's a broad willingness among Arab partners to see a deal reach a conclusion. And underlying everything, you mentioned some of the U.S. president's posts, underlying everything is the possibility, which I don't believe anybody wants, but that we might revert back to a military situation if Iran does not demonstrate good non-proliferating behavior.
Dr. Bowe, let's get to a soundbite of the Vice President spelling out the U.S. intentions for these talks. Watch.
What the president has asked us to do is turn over a new leaf, to transform our relationship with the people of Iran and to extend an outstretched hand that says to the people of Iran that if your leadership is willing to give up being a driver of regional instability, if they are willing to give up nuclear weapons ambitions for the long term, then the United States is willing to fundamentally transform our relationship with that country.
Your reaction to the Vice President's stated purpose here?
Well, it's striking language. Note, he's talking about a fundamental transformation of relations. So again, we haven't seen these kinds of high-level contacts between the U.S. and Iran since 1971. You have Arab partners like Qatar joining, like the UAE, like Oman. We're not just talking about sticks here or about containing an existing nuclear program. We're actually talking about a broader framework. So President Trump has implied that Iran might be invited to become a part of the Abraham Accords. And let's be clear, this framework, unlike the one that President Obama negotiated, is performance-based, but assuming that the Iranians really commit to non-proliferation and, in my read, non-enrichment of uranium on their soil, we're looking at numbers like $300 billion. We're looking at a serious long-term economic restructuring and reorienting of relations between Iran and the West. So, look, this is frustrating that it's going slowly, but I think it really is a historic opportunity.
Yeah, in one sense, it kind of makes sense that it would be frustrating because we're talking about some tectonic shift in history, based on what you're saying.
Yes. Well, and let's be clear, the most important issues are deferred to the next 60 days. So do we have the finish line yet? We don't. We're supposed to figure out all the nuclear related thorny questions. But, we've got 60 days. And here's what I tell people. And I hear the complaints, the critiques on the left and on the right. You look at some of the most successful treaties going back to the 1970s, the Camp David Accords started out not looking great. Of course, Egypt takes that first step, is ostracized by many other Arab nations. We look back now and see the Camp David Accords as highly successful. The Good Friday Agreement, you think about peace in Northern Ireland today, highly messy, sequenced steps right as it's starting out. Of course, peace in Bosnia in the 1990s brought about through the Dayton agreements. That also did not look, optimal when it first was, getting off the ground. It was highly messy. And so the fact that we have a framework, the fact that we're taking even small steps in this historic site with the Qatari prime minister, with Pakistan there, as well as the U.S. delegation, I think you're right. This is historic, and it's worthy of note.
Now, before heading to Switzerland, the vice president said a key focus of these talks would be the Iran nuclear issue and the Lebanon ceasefire issue, of course. So that is indeed an issue, with Hezbollah attacking Israel and Israel retaliating, all after a ceasefire was announced. So could this back and forth derail the 60-day ceasefire?
Hezbollah in Lebanon certainly complicates the overall negotiations, but let me say, I don't believe that it will derail them for a couple reasons. Number one, you've seen President Trump be willing to speak very directly with our ally Israel, and speak in harsh terms, even with Prime Minister Netanyahu. So I think the U.S. and Israel understand the U.S.-Israeli relationship is healthy, but there's a need for direct communication. Secondly, let me say there's a UN resolution that makes very clear that Hezbollah is not to be a part of southern Lebanon. And that's really what Israel is insisting on, as I see it. Lebanon is a multi-factional state where you see power sharing among Shiites, Sunnis, and Christians. And so it's been hard at times for the state of Lebanon to assert centralized control over a dangerous militia like Hezbollah. Hezbollah needs to stand down. My guess is Israel may pull back a little bit, but Israel's security concerns need to be acknowledged here as well as part of the comprehensive framework.
Dr. Boat, just in the last 30 seconds or so, what do you think will ultimately come out of these talks? Are you optimistic?
The reason I'm optimistic is I see Vice President Vance, the Pakistani Prime Minister, Mr. Sharif, and other parties potentially pushing for the kind of arrangement that the UAE currently has with respect to nuclear power. So to be clear what that means, the United Arab Emirates does not enrich on its soil. They don't enrich uranium. They import all their nuclear fuel because everybody understands this president, this American president, has been willing to leave the military option on the table. It creates an entirely different kind of negotiating environment where people are incentivized differently. He's willing to extend the hand of economic investment along with Arab partners. So that's why I'm much more hopeful than previous attempts to bring about a lasting and comprehensive peace.
All right, Professor of Political Science at Tarleton University, Dr. Bo Kabbalah, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Good to be with you.
Next, President Trump today predicted that embattled British Prime Minister Keir Starmer will be stepping down. It comes after weeks of political pressure on the British leader. Trump posted on Truth Social, Keir Starmer will resign as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. He failed badly on two very important subjects, immigration and energy. I wish him well, unquote. Starmer has not officially made an announcement. He has faced calls to quit from his own party after the party lost English local elections and parliamentary votes in Scotland and Wales, and amid growing fears that Starmer himself may not be able to defeat Conservative leader Nigel Farage in the next election. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer's business minister, Peter Kyle, said the prime minister is now reflecting on the political realities he faces. The business minister shrugged off reports by local media that Starmer is expected to resign as soon as Monday. Here's the story.
We will protect
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer could be resigning as soon as Monday. A report by the Observer newspaper said Starmer was discussing the matter with his wife at his Chequers country residence before making a final decision, but that senior figures from his Labour Party were expecting a clear statement on his future imminently.
Change begins now.
Starmer has become deeply unpopular since leading the centre-left Labour to a landslide election win in 2024. The threat to his position rose sharply on Friday when his rival Andy Burnham won a seat in Parliament that would allow him to launch a formal leadership challenge. On Sunday, Business Minister Peter Kyle shrugged off the speculations over Starmer's exit. He told Sky News that he had nothing to believe that they are true. Keir said he had had a frank talk with the Prime Minister and said he believed Starmer went into the weekend, quote, working very hard as Prime Minister, as he always does, but also that he was trying to create the space where he can think and reflect on the political realities. In response to the Observer report, a government source said the Prime Minister remained focused on getting on with the job of governing. On Friday, after Burnham's parliamentary win, Starmer called on Labour to stay united, with a by-election now due to replace Burnham as the Mayor of Manchester. He also repeated his stance that he would fight any challenge to his leadership.
I'm not going to walk away from that.
The British Prime Minister's main internal rival is fellow Labour Party politician Andy Burnham. A recent turn of events means Burnham is now in a position to be able to mount a leadership challenge to take the UK's top job. The 56-year-old is an experienced politician who previously worked in high-level government jobs. He ran twice for the leadership of the Labour Party, once in 2010 and once again in 2015, losing badly. Since then, he's gained notoriety as mayor of the northern British city of Manchester, holding the post for 3 consecutive terms. And a recent win in a special election earned him a seat in British Parliament. That's what gives him the opportunity to challenge Starmer and become Britain's next Prime Minister. Colombians are voting today in a presidential runoff that could reshape the country's approach to security, the economy, and relations with the United States. Voters are choosing between 2 candidates with very different plans for tackling crime and Colombia's ongoing conflict with armed groups. Here's more.
After no candidate won a majority in May's first round, voters are deciding between Iván Cepeda and Abelardo de la Espriella. For many Colombians, the runoff is about the country's future.
Well, for me, it is a very important day for Colombia. It is a day when we are all very happy, because it is a democratic moment in which we want the best for Colombia.
Cepeda is a longtime lawmaker backed by left-wing President Gustavo Petro. He's promising to continue many of the current government's policies, including social programs for low-income Colombians, labor reforms, and peace talks with armed groups. Meanwhile, de la Espriella is a lawyer who topped the first round of voting in May. He has also drawn attention in Washington after President Trump endorsed his campaign and said the election could impact the future of US-Colombia relations. He's promising a crackdown on crime, closer security ties with the US, lower taxes, and expanding oil and gas development. He is also pushing a free market economic agenda and calling for a military offensive against the armed groups. The election comes as Colombia faces rising concerns over violence, with criminal organizations and drug trafficking groups gaining strength in several regions of the country. With nearly half of eligible voters sitting out the first round, both candidates made voter turnout a central part of their campaigns.
Coming back to the U.S., a federal judge has rejected former President Joe Biden's attempt to block the release of audio recordings connected to his 2017 memoir. The recordings come from Biden's conversations related to a memoir about the death of his son, Beau. Trump-appointed Judge Dabney Friedrich ruled that the Justice Department can turn the audio over to the conservative think tank, the Heritage Foundation. The foundation argued that the recordings should be public because they were part of the government's review on how Biden handled classified information. The judge said the tapes can be released under the Freedom of Information Act. Biden's legal team is appealing. America's 250th anniversary is almost here, a history marker in our nation's remarkable history. NTD will bring you special coverage of the Freedom 250 Salute to America celebration taking place in the nation's capital this 4th of July. It'll be packed with tributes to the country, the people, and the trailblazers who helped define our national identity, bringing America's legacy to life on stage. Plus, a fireworks show that Freedom 250 says will be the biggest in history. Our coverage starts at 7 p.m. Eastern. See you then. Coming up, FIFA fans diving into American culture. See what some stellar moments on social media when we come back.
He grew up so quick. He just surprised me every day. He's really smart. I really think he can be an astronaut, president. But I'm gonna support him for wherever he wants to be. I really want to be a photographer, musician, whatever. As a father, I guess you don't focus on you. I put himself first. That's what a dad does.
Ahead of the World Cup, many international fans were skeptical of the idea of the U.S. as co-host for soccer's biggest tournament. But as the tournament has gotten underway, many say they've had a warm welcome in America. Take a look.
They've been great hosts, and I hope we've been great guests.
When international soccer fans depart the U.S. after the World Cup, they'll be heading back with souvenirs, good memories, and for many, changed opinions of the country. In Massachusetts, Scottish fans have been adorning locals with bagpipes and Tartan Army chants.
Boston has been fabulous, absolutely brilliant. Beautiful city, beautiful people, so friendly and welcoming.
I don't think we could have asked for a better place to come to enjoy the World Cup experience.
Many international fans once questioned the U.S. as co-hosts over worries of visa access, high costs, gun violence, and a lack of local interest in the sport. High ticket and travel prices have also prevented some from making the trip. Those worries have not been entirely dispelled, but as the World Cup continues, so do more feel-good stories of abroad fans enjoying the U.S. In Philadelphia, international fans got their hands on a world-famous delicacy, the Philly cheesesteak.
Philly cheesesteak, mira, muy delicioso.
And in Atlanta, this fan from South Africa got her first taste of a Southern American breakfast.
Just trying everything that we see on TV, that we see on Instagram. That's exactly what we're doing.
Research has consistently indicated that hosting a major sports event can genuinely shift long-held stereotypes.
Coming up, today is Father's Day, and we talk with presidential historian Jane Hampton Cook on the history of the holiday and the father's role in family life. Plus, thousands gather overnight at Stonehenge to watch the sunrise and celebrate a tradition that spans thousands of years. More in just a moment here on NTD Evening News.
Every day, thousands of kids start vaping. And I can't let this happen to my kid. Of course, it's awkward to talk to your kids about the dangers of vaping. Hey, bestie, how's sketches? Ready? It's hard to get their attention. Ready? Go. Yes, look at that. You even turn yours over. So if you want to talk to your kids about the dangers of vaping, you have to get it trending. Right, Backpack Kid?
Let's do it.
First, invite your kid to do the vape talk. Let's try this. All right.
Why is he here?
Yeah, I gotta get it trending, honey.
Come on.
To the left. To the right. Let's go.
Oh, honey, can we talk?
Yeah, what's up?
I see a lot of your friends vaping.
Visit talkaboutVaping.org for tips on when and how to have the vape talk.
Hi, I'm Ryan Blaney, a third-generation race car driver, and we dedicate a lot of our time to going as fast as possible. My grandpa Lou is the reason why my dad and I started racing, and I'm really proud to follow in his tracks. But when my grandpa was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, it was a very unexpected bump in the road for us. I've learned a lot on this journey with my grandpa Lou, and the memories of my grandpa will always be with me. And in our family, we're used to getting involved, and I encourage you to do the same, especially when it comes to caring for your loved ones. When I think about Alzheimer's and the impact it had on my family, I recognize that losing a race isn't such a bad day after all. It's important to notice if older family members are acting differently, experiencing problems with their memory, or having trouble with routine tasks. Talking about Alzheimer's can be really tough, but if you notice something, have a conversation with your loved one. Encourage them to see a doctor or offer to go with them. Early detection of Alzheimer's can give your family time to explore support services, make a plan for the future, and access available treatments. If you or your family are noticing changes, it could be Alzheimer's. Talk about seeing a doctor together.
We said we'd never give in to a meltdown.
Okay.
And we'd never babysit with a screen. We said we'd never let the toys take over.
Mariella!
Never leave the house looking, well, and never let them out of our sight. Skylar, come here. Cars get hot fast, and kids can be at risk. Before you leave the car, always stop, look, lock.
Welcome back. Today is Father's Day, and to celebrate, we're bringing in presidential historian Jane Hampton Cook for a discussion on the history of the holiday. Jane, welcome back. It's always good to see you. So, just to start off with, where does Father's Day come from?
So Father's Day was inspired by Mother's Day. In West Virginia, they had a Mother's Day celebration. And then in 1910, there was a Father's Day acknowledgement. Some coal miners had lost their lives, and so there was an emphasis on fatherhood. And then a woman named Sonora Smart Dodd in Spokane, Washington, decided that they needed a Father's Day similar to Mother's Day. And so she's the one that started it, and it became a statewide holiday in Washington state. And then over time, it spread to the rest of the country. President Calvin Coolidge gave a nod to it, but it wasn't until Lyndon Johnson issued a proclamation declaring the third Sunday in June Father's Day. And then 6 years later, in 1972, Richard Nixon made it a federal holiday. And so that's the history. It started local, it became state, and now, of course, it's widespread throughout the United States.
And what an important day it is. There wouldn't be any of us without fathers, just like with mothers. So thank you, fathers. Has the meaning of Father's Day changed from the early years through to today?
You know, what I think is similar is that Sonora had her first child a year before the first Father's Day. So she and her husband were enjoying parenthood. And I think, you know, I have a good friend. He's having his first Father's Day this year. His wife had a baby almost a year ago. And so it's that life brings that excitement and that joy to fatherhood, whether you're a new father or you're like my husband, we have young adult children, or like my father who's in his 80s. And so Father's Day just spans so many generations and decades that if it means something personally today, it also meant something very personal back then to the people who started it.
Yeah, and it did start here in America, but now it's celebrated around the world. So there have, of course, been multiple father-son presidents, John Adams and John Quincy Adams, George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush. So how does the father-son dynamic play out for presidents like these?
Well, you know, I think the presidential father, in the case of John Adams and John Quincy Adams, there was certainly an influence, just not only the love between father and son, but also on what they prioritized. John Adams took the Declaration of Independence, the clause that all men are created equal, and put that in the Massachusetts Constitution. And then a judge declared in 1783 that slavery was unconstitutional based on that clause that John Adams had put in the Massachusetts Constitution. And you fast forward 60 years, John Quincy Adams becomes the loudest advocate for abolishing slavery. And so he saw that the remedy hadn't gone widespread. And so, you know, in the 1840s, he is, you know, this loud advocate for slavery, even arguing a very pivotal case before the Supreme Court. And he quoted that clause in the Declaration of Independence that his father had championed so many years earlier. And so, of course, they are special because we're experiencing America's 250th birthday this year. But then when I look back at President George W. Bush, and I had the opportunity to work for him when he was governor of Texas and then when he was president, and he always talked about his father as being his dad first. He didn't look to his father as president first. He talked about that love relationship. But then whenever he and his father had a conversation while George W. was president, it was all about just the loving support of a father. And I think that's the beautiful personal side. And so having had a recent father-son duo be presidents, in the past, several years, we see what that relationship can be like. And of course, sometimes there's a lot of pressure on the son. The comparisons can be difficult. But then, there's the fun side. We've got those great pictures of JFK with his son, John Jr., in the Oval Office. His son's peeking out the desk. And so family life is something that we've come to appreciate too when we see it modeled in our presidents.
Yeah, and it's so nice to see these really personal photos and stories about presidents because, you know, they get so intensely politicized, of course, and it becomes this highly pressurized thing whenever you talk about or think about a president. And yeah, that kind of lightheartedness is refreshing. So this year
That's
is
right.
the 250th anniversary. It's the 250th anniversary of the founding of the United States. So it seems timely to talk about America's founding father, George Washington. Of all the founding fathers, he's arguably the most famous. So why do you think that is?
Well, I think that's because George Washington was such a strong leader, starting from when he was a young man. He was a leader, an officer to a British general in the 1750s, and he became a household name because his journals of him going to the Ohio River Valley and the French and Indian War. People knew who Major George Washington was, and then he was looked to, of course, to lead the Continental Army in 1775. And he took the reins of what was this lackluster, ragtag group of men who didn't have uniforms and built an army out of it and defeated the greatest military power in the world, Great Britain, in 1783 when the war was over. And so George Washington was the natural fit to become the first president. And I think what made him special is that he didn't really want the job. It wasn't all about him, and he gave up power. He was in a position that he could have probably remained president for 20 years, whatever his lifespan turned out to be, but he chose to step down after 2 terms, and that really set the example for the presidents who came after him. There's a friend of mine has a book called Refusing the Crown, and he's looked at how other countries were influenced by George Washington's decision to step away from power. And I have a lot of George Washington stories in a new book that's just been out a few weeks. It's called A Great and Grateful Nation, From Grievance to Gratitude. And it's an illustrated keepsake book for America's 250 that gives you the story of the American Revolution and then perspective-taking essays. And George Washington is probably mentioned more than any other historic character in my book because he just was so pivotal and such a great example to Americans of his generation and also today.
It's just a remarkable story. I wish we could get into that. That's a whole other interview. So Jane, just before we
That's
go,
right.
What is your Father's Day message to all the fathers out there?
Just keep loving on your kids and take joy in being a father. Sometimes when it's really difficult, it's sometimes hard to be grateful for the good things. I know we experience that in our family. And that's the theme of my book, gratitude. And to take joy in the good moments and know that you'll get through the tense ones and the difficult ones. And I think that's a thing that we could all do, whether we're mothers or fathers or wherever we are in our lives, looking at the good things and having gratitude.
Absolutely. We can all definitely do a lot more of that. Presidential historian Jane Hampton Cook, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
All right. Our next guest is a constitutional law professor who's been closely watching the legal battles over presidential power. Steve Ispas from Bay Area Innovators sat down with Elon Merman, professor at the University of Minnesota and author of the upcoming book, The Constitution of 1789, to talk about the separation of powers, including a deep dive into the National Guard deployment cases and what the founders actually intended for the judiciary's role.
I think you're pretty passionate about, and that's the National Guard cases. How does the Constitution see or in any way talks about the deployment of National Guard?
This is a really important case because I think it illustrates the separation of powers with which we started. The separation of powers maintains that judges and courts have a role, including in reviewing executive action and legislative action for consistency with the law, for consistency with the Constitution, but only through an exercise of judicial power. The judges are not supposed to be this council of revision, that these roving commissions just looking at what the executive does and automatically decides whether it's lawful or constitutional or not. This is how they do it in Israel, by the way, speaking of that topic. There are no injury requirements. There's no cause of action requirement. There's no standing requirement. The second The Israeli legislature does something, or the executive does something, someone files a petition, and the High Court of Justice gets to decide. The American founders rejected that explicitly. There were proposals for what was called the Council of Revision, where the judges would sit in judgment of legislation to determine if it was constitutional, and they said, no, that is not the role for judges. Judges exercise judicial power, which means they resolve actual real cases, okay? Actual real cases involving a live injury. Somebody has to be injured before they could invoke the courts and get the court. And in remedying that injury, the courts might review legislation or executive branch actions for legality or constitutionality. But that's very different than having this roving commission. So let me give you an example. When the National Guard, or the militia, was deployed during the War of 1812, okay? So a long time ago. How was this challenged? How was this challenged? Somebody thought the call was unconstitutional because they thought the invasion wasn't imminent enough. And the Constitution says there must be some threat of invasion or other, reasons you could call forth the militia. So this individual, okay, Jacob Mott, refused the call. And he was fined by a court-martial in absentia. He refused to pay the fine. So the local sheriff, one Martin, seized Mott's horse and in order to pay the debt. And so then Jacob Mott sued the sheriff, Martin, for conversion of property and trespass. That is a judicial injury. That is a cognizable injury. That is a cause of action. Trespass, conversion of property. That's the common law. Okay, so that's and here's really the crux of it, though. If the courts said, you know what, you're right, Madison's call of the militia was unlawful, what happens? Jacob Mott gets his horse back. The fine is absolved. He is made whole. His injury is remedied. But the courts don't play commander-in-chief. The courts don't say, therefore, James Madison, you must withdraw the call of the militia. I mean, the war had ended long before this case ever reached the Supreme Court. In other words, courts can exercise their role, they can exercise judicial power, and they could make private individuals whole. They could remedy their injuries without playing commander-in-chief. Fast forward to today. What happened in the National Guard case? Trump deploys the National Guard. The second he does so, Gavin Newsom sues. The governor of California sues. Okay, well, excuse me, what is Gavin Newsom's injury? What's his cause of action? Does he have a tort claim? Trespass, conversion of property, false imprisonment? Does he have some injury? No. They rely on things like the Administrative Procedure Act, which I do not believe creates a cause of action, but that's a whole separate discussion. They rely on things like ultra vires, ex parte Young, which are these doctrines which we don't have to get into, but which have been totally misinterpreted and abused, which really stand for the proposition that you can bring an anticipatory lawsuit if the government is going to come and enforce something against you. Well, no one was going after Gavin Newsom. He didn't have an anticipatory lawsuit, an anticipatory defense. He had no basis whatsoever to bring a lawsuit. And yet it went all the way to the Supreme Court, and they decided on the merits because nobody asked the question, wait, what is your cause of action? What is your injury? I want to be very clear to your listeners. This doesn't mean that the executive gets to do whatever he wants. It doesn't mean that there's no remedy for unconstitutional actions. It just means that there must be an injury. So if a National Guardsman refused the call, refused the order, like Jacob Mott refused the order, right, in the War of 1812, that would be an injury. What if a National Guardsman, under orders in California, falsely imprisoned somebody or assaulted someone or committed some battery or trespassed on somebody's property? Well, then a private person could bring a suit historically against the National Guardsman. The National Guardsman would defend, saying, I have orders. And then the plaintiff would say, your orders are unlawful because the National Guard deployment is unlawful. That is a judicial case. And again, the courts could make that person whole by paying the money, ordering, a remedy of some kind, but they're not playing commander-in-chief. It doesn't follow, that the single judge gets to command and direct the president as to what he can and can't do with the National Guard. It just means that if there's an injury, the courts will step in. This is so crucial for the separation of powers and for properly understanding the judicial role. And it has been terribly, terribly misunderstood. So to connect it to the previous question, I am passionate about this today, especially. A lot of people think Trump is this threat to the Republic. And look, I'm not going to defend everything he does. But if there is a greater threat to the Republic, it is district judges of whom there are 600 plus across the country, a single one pretending, presuming, purporting to have the power to basically play commander-in-chief, to play chief executive, chief administrator, even if there aren't real cases or real injuries. And that is the big problem. It is the judges today who I think have totally overstepped. And that is something I'm particularly passionate about.
Next, thousands gathered at Stonehenge in England to welcome the first sunrise of summer. The ancient monument hosted its annual solstice celebration, drawing crowds who came to witness a tradition dating back thousands of years. Take a look.
About 20,000 people gathered overnight at Stonehenge for the summer solstice. The event marks the longest day of the year in the Northern Hemisphere. As the sun rose Sunday morning, crowds cheered, danced, and played music around the ancient stones.
It's actually been a really beautiful solstice. We've had a peaceful celebration. Everyone's having a lovely time. And it was a great sunrise because actually the sun took a little bit longer to get up. So there was a lot of anticipation and cheering and drumming, and so everyone was very excited.
The monument in southern England is famous for its connection to the movement of the sun. During the solstice, the sunrise lines up with a heel stone just outside the main circle. Archaeologists believe Stonehenge was built thousands of years ago, between 3000 and 2000 BC. Today, it remains one of the world's most recognizable prehistoric landmarks.
Coming up in the FIFA World Cup, Spain and Japan end their matches with identical outcomes, both with dominant victories over their opponents. Find out how it happened and more about a young Spanish player who could become soccer's next big star when we come back.
The 8th NTD International Piano Competition welcomes distinguished pianists from around the world, celebrating the depth, discipline, and expressive power of the Baroque, classical, and romantic repertoire. September 1st through the 5th, 2026, New York City. Apply at piano.ntdtv.com, honoring the timeless tradition of the piano.
This is how I keep my joints happy.
Omega XL is a powerful natural supplement backed by 40 years of clinical research. Take control of your pain, like Cynthia Bailey.
My knees in particular started giving me pain issues all the way back to my modeling days, from just running through airports, photo shoots. After taking Omega XL, I really started to notice how less stiff I was, especially my knees and my hip. Has Omega XL changed my life? Yes. I barely notice my joint pain anymore. Now I'm like literally sprinting through the airports. My secret is Omega XL.
Pick up the phone and call now to get this exclusive TV offer. Buy one Omega XL and we'll send you a second bottle absolutely free. You'll also get a free bottle of Vitamin XL D3. Buy one, get two free. A total value of over $115, all for just $49.95. You save more than 55% and shipping is free. Backed by a money-back guarantee and is not available in stores. Operators are standing by, so call now.
There's a whirlwind of emotion and activity going on in this painting. And there's chaos all around and threat from below. The walls surrounding her, and they're anything but unmoved. They're moving all the time, and we sense that. But this little girl remains unmoved.
She's in quite a perilous situation, but she's completely strong and serene, and she's actually meditating. It was very, very well liked because no matter what culture or what sort of walk of life you're from, I think people, they see it and they immediately understand what that energy, what that message is, and they're drawn to it because everybody kind of needs a little bit of that in their own life, of, you know, the steadfast calmness and something to hold on to. It's definitely an inner peace in the midst of something very chaotic, and for a lot of people right now, the whole world is very, very chaotic, so I guess that's another reason why so many people are very drawn to this.
There are real consequences to controlled media. And NTD's founders know them firsthand. Our freedom of thought is the price. This is the lesson that guides us in everything we do.
So there's the tear gas there.
We know the value of a free society. And we take seriously the responsibility to preserve it. We are NTD.
After Japan's World Cup victory over Tunisia in Monterrey, Mexico Saturday night, fans not only celebrated the win, but also stayed behind to pick up trash from the stands. Let's take a look.
This habit, known in Japan as gomi hiroi, or litter collection, comes from a strong cultural emphasis on cleaning up after yourself and respecting shared spaces. And many fans say it has become completely natural for them.
From an early age, Japanese people are taught to clean their own classrooms at school and to leave places cleaner than before. That's why I feel very proud to see this spirit being displayed in a stadium that is attracting the attention of people worldwide.
It is considered as a common courtesy in our culture to clean up everything we've used so that the next person can use it comfortably.
Images of fans cleaning the stadiums have gone viral. Before one game, at the request of Japanese FIFA fans, local authorities even distributing 20,000 trash bags, as many around the world express admiration.
I think it's excellent that they're cleaning the stadiums. I believe it sets a great example for everyone, and what a privilege to have them here, to be their hosts.
Japanese fans say it's really just common sense for them.
This is kind of like culture and like traditional things, I think, and this is also like Japanese like identity kind of. Like we are very proud of like this tradition and also culture.
Wow, love that. Sesame Street's Elmo is setting the record straight. He's rooting for Team USA for the World Cup. This comes after the character ruffled some feathers as the recently completed NBA Finals were starting. Elmo posted on social media that he hoped both teams have fun. Some real-life New Yorkers took issue with Elmo refusing to take the side of his hometown team. So Elmo is now addressing the World Cup games.
Just to be clear, Elmo wants Team USA to win, okay? But Elmo loves everybody. Just to be clear. Don't make this a thing. Thank you. Elmo loves you, and Elmo loves you, and Elmo loves you, and Team USA, and everybody who's playing.
Elmo and USA fans are happy after the U.S. men's national team earned a 2-0 victory over Australia Friday. Thank you so much for watching NTD Evening News. For round-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. I'm Chris Beers. Have a good night.